Hello, everyone. This is Mark Anthony with AI Edge Podcast, the place where we bring to you the best of the best doctors in their area and in their niche. The great thing about today is we're going to be speaking with Dr. Drew Collins. You can find him at Proactive Choice. As you see, the website's there and also the phone number if you have any questions to ask him. Today, we're going to be talking about ADHD, neurodivergent, and spectrum disorders, and your kids' future. How many of us have kids right now? How many of us have been told, hey, your son has ADHD or your gal has ADHD, and hey, you know what? You need to take this pill and take this pill and this pill. And eventually they'll just have a whole bunch of pills as they get older. Now, I'm not here knocking pills because, some things work, but that's another story. So today we're going to be talking with Dr. Drew, and this is very important, everyone. I want to tell you guys that one video can change one person's life. The great thing about Dr. Drew, he hasn't been doing this for a little bit. He's been doing this for a long time. And if you're looking to have him as a speaker, at wherever you live, I don't care if it's in Australia, down under, Tokyo, he is ready to rock and roll and take the stage. He is a world renowned speaker and he is here to help. So please, audience out there, sharing is caring. So thank you so much, Dr. Drew, for being here on the show.
Mark, thanks for having me back. And I know we had started teasing about this subject a little
Yeah,
bit.
we did.
We were talking about the manly bro subjects. I did want to mention that my practice is starting to notice more and more of these mood disorders and the impact on the families. And I think I shared a little bit with you offline there that my family has had a long lineage of mental illness. So it really cuts to the bone when we're talking about the impact on the social fabric of a family. So what's going on, Mark, is and thanks for having me again, because I want to talk to your audience too, because you have like a high motivated audience. They're looking for health and they're looking for answers outside of just the conventional information. And we're at a crisis now in the school systems, and we're in kind of at a all the institutions are kind of crumbling, but certainly education is kind of up for grabs. And funding cuts, all the different extracurricular programs are being cut. People are taking the kids back home and doing homeschooling. And guess what? We're finding out that a large population of these kids have diagnosed, we call it neurodivergence. That's a new word that's available. And it includes a lot of things that we used to just think, oh, it's, the funny looking kid or the weird kid or the band kid or the kid that can't sit still or ants in their pants. But it's more than that, Mark. It's diagnosable. And the current situation is a medical intervention into the school systems where the teachers are over their head. They've got 30 kids plus in a classroom, and you get one hyperactive kid or one kid that isn't verbal or English as a second language or something, and all of a sudden the whole dynamic of a typical educational format crumbles. There's no music programs anymore. They can't let the kids out to play in the woods anymore. So what I noticed was that the families are coming apart. Now, most people they're blessed with a two parents, but both have to work. And the kids are kind of let loose on the schools to educate them, bring them up, and even give them moral training. But then it gets bounced back to the parents like, hey, this kid isn't fitting in. And that's a shameful thing. The parents want to, have the teacher fix them or more homework or, get back to school. And that's when the school counselor gets called in. And more often than not, the school counselor's doing their best. They have, 100 kids they have to talk with, and they're often limited by what they can do under the school board or whatever. And then pretty quickly they get asked to have a medical professional evaluate the kid if they have the means. This could be kind of stratified according to social economic availability. And they talk about these things being diagnosed in areas of affluence, but really it's across the board. So besides macronutrition and kids not getting enough to eat and basic safety issues that all parents need to take care of all the children, make sure the kids aren't being abused and that kind of thing. Let's put a pin in that, because that's unsung heroes at any age, is taking care of the kids or somebody else's kids. But when it comes to these types of behaviors, and I'm talking about attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which wasn't really a thing until the 1900s. And they called it behavioral problems. But now they've got diagnoses. And these diagnoses all have a very hard knuckled code. and the code is linked to medicine that's allowed to be prescribed medically. And once that gets in your file, pretty much that's who you are, and that can affect jobs or interviews or whatever you think about yourself. So I would like to offer from I'm a naturopathic doctor, as you know, so I would like to give you guys out there in Radio Land some hope that there's adjunctive or additional or supportive things to do right now, tomorrow, that'll help take the steam out of this crisis. And also at the end, put a pin in this one, Mark, there's some breakthrough genetic testing that we did not have 10 years ago. Gets back to the Human Genome Project, where they figured out they can map out the whole human genetics, but there's very specific genes that are showing up to be characteristically knocked out or not functional in these types of mood disorders. So it's not just a behavioral problem, like, make that kid work harder or something like that. It's genetic. Okay, what's about genetics? Genetics means that you're probably inheriting it from your mommy and daddy, but it also means epigenetics. That means what you can do with it. So we're going to talk about some stuff at the end here, which could save 20 years off of the child's life. If you figured it out today, if you got that test, if that kid was positive for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these genetic knockouts, and you supplement it with the non-drug form of a specific type of nutrient, you can mitigate all the symptoms and a lot of the things that accumulate. These are toxic accumulations in your body that end up doing heart disease and cancer and things you wouldn't associate with behavior. So this all rolls into a lot of the things that socially we've decided was bad behavior, like addiction, things like depression. We just get over it, just snap out of it, right? Things like phobic behavior, anxiety. Everyone's got anxiety, right? Well, it turns out some people can't help it. And we can go into the conversation about the neurochemistry of it, which is kind of fascinating, but it gets a little bit off-putting.
Dr. Drew, would you say that, so what you're saying is that this is something that you're born with?
Yes.
Something that it comes around a little bit later sometimes?
Okay, well, separate out traumatic brain injury, separate out something like fetal alcohol syndrome, separate out things that are the brain has been compromised somehow, an accident, car accident, or something like that. Forceps delivery, something that's happened to the nerves of the brain or whatever. We're talking about the genetic inheritance from mommy and daddy. And by the way, I have a case history where it was a surrogate mother, surrogate egg donor, right? So the surrogate egg donor had the genetic knockouts. And so daddy had some and genetic mom had some. And so the kid got double whammy, and now they're having a real problem with the kid in school. And they didn't know this until they did this particular genetic test, and they can tell that one comes from one of the parent and that one comes from the other parent. And the mother, adopted mother or whatever, the non-biological mother said, hey, I'm not in that because I'm not part of that genetic makeup. Where's
Right.
second pair come from? It came from the donor egg. So they screen egg donors for viruses and that kind of stuff, but they're not screening them for these genetic knockouts because they didn't know about them. Buyer beware, right?
Wow.
When you get when you're paying, $70,000 for some surrogate eggs, they could have these genetic knockouts. But pretty quickly they'll be figuring that out because it's embarrassing when they're selling the high dollar eggs and they're kind of compromised. So getting back to what's going on, the school systems have basically their hands full. They're educators and they defer all medical things to the medical system. There's a medical nurse, sometimes a school nurse, but a lot of times they kind of rotate through the different school systems and they're not there all the time, just like counselors aren't there all the time. So the teachers get this crazy mix of kids, right? What we just did a talk, the associate and I did a talk about this, and we were trying to talk to the parents. We wanted it to be a kind of a town hall, where people would come and they would be able to, in a safe place,
Express himself.
yeah, talk about, my kid is driving me nuts, and I don't want to say that to my friends because they have perfect kids and I'm just embarrassed because my kid won't sit still. And even to the point where I can't have a babysitter, no babysitter will take them, right? And that grinds on a parent. So practical stuff, and hopefully at the end of our talk, what can we do today? Well, find out how your kid learns and how you can communicate to them. And there's a bunch of different ways and different books and different tests and different people and specialists who can help you figure out how your kid learns.
Let's talk about that real quick, what you
Yeah,
just said. There are
styles
going
of
to be
learning.
people that don't know, they don't feel comfortable to connect with somebody out there. Let's just be real. But sometimes they feel, I've noticed that with you, you have a lot of people that call you and they book a time with you. How does that look? And do you offer that, correct? I just want to make sure where you can help people over Zoom and maybe give them some direction with what you're talking about.
Right. So I have patients. And I've been in practice 41 years. So I've had everything from delivering home births to cancer clinics to chelation to pediatrics to homeopathy. And right now I'm kind of doing a concierge thing where I have people all over the country. They call me and their main problem might be their kid. And that's my patient. Or their main problem might be them. And then their kid's standing there making trouble in the office. And they go, can you do you take kids? So it's kind of a referral thing. So one of the things I acknowledge is that it takes a village to fix a kid. It takes a village to fix a village. And this intention of the talks that we're given is not so much I'm the expert and the parents need to hear it. It's more that the parents are the experts because they're living with it all day long.
Mhm.
And every kid's a little bit different. So you can't cookie cutter them. And what they really want to hear is they're doing the best they can. They want to hear attaboys because they're exhausted. And just give me something that'll help. That where I come in is I can get access to the testing that they wouldn't know about if they went to a regular pediatrician. It's not that the regular pediatrician couldn't find out if they went to a conference or they, look up or chased down a rabbit hole. But anybody that does insurance type medicine, where it's reimbursable, whether it's a VA or whatever the PPO, or whatever the system is, you're locked in to what your insurance covers. And those kind of doctors don't pursue cutting edge type information for the.
So it's bare minimum you're saying normally,
Well,
just just
it's
just
I
enough
would
information for you to.
Well, it's more like they feel like they're doing what they're supposed to do based on their standard of care. So standard of care, and again, they're seeing a lot of kids. So you're running through a mill of seeing a lot of kids, and the best they can do, and they get specialists. So the specialist would be more of a psychiatric neurologist or a pediatric neurologist, and they're taking one at a time. But they give them this DSM-5 diagnosis. They have to. That's their job. So they give it a diagnosis, which is an observational diagnosis. So you don't do a blood test to figure out if the kid's hyper. That's the kind of stuff I do. So what I offer, and I could be somewhere else in a different state, and I can say, let's hook you up with a immunoglobulin G food allergy test, and absolutely take 30% off those behaviors
Right.
that you don't want, which the average pediatrician doesn't do. They do scratch tests and that kind of stuff, which is IgE. Different thing. This cheek swab thing that we're going to talk about, breakthrough, any doctor can find it. It's not going to be reimbursed, and it's not in the system of a clinic that they may be currently working at. But any doctor can have access to it if they want to do it, and it's safe and quick and breakthrough information. So it's more about not that I'm a specialist, but more that I'm interested in getting natural solutions that don't suppress the system. And also, I don't have to be constrained by what the insurance companies will pay for because it's a cash relationship.
You say suppress the system. What does that really mean?
Well, you've heard of Adderall, right? Okay. So that's speed, and speed is concentrated. So in a nutshell, a lot of these behaviors are because the kid's not getting a dopamine hit in their neurotransmitter receptors. So not to get too much into the weeds with this, but the regular people get dopamine from a lot of different behaviors. People who tend to be hard to focus only get dopamine with certain behaviors. And so they will not be able to be satiated or happy or still unless they're doing that one behavior. So if they're taking apart a toaster or something, they could be doing that for hours. Or if they're working on their bug collection or something like that, they can do it for hours. They get dopamine just like we do from watching TV or something like that. But what these drugs do is they rush in some more of that dopamine shaped molecule so they get it for sitting in the chair listening to the teacher. They get it more. They get it for other things. So they're calmer during other situations they normally would be antsy and jump around. So the teachers and the parents go, look at that. He's sitting there. He's quiet. He's doing his numbers. He's whatever. But the downside of that is that these are very interesting and special and magical kids, and they're brilliant. And they tend to be the kind of people that bring in innovative stuff, artists of the world or innovators of the world or musicians or that kind of thing. And when you blunt them with extra dopamine and keep them from focusing on the thing they're really interested in doing, it takes it away from society later. You take Mozart and keep him, chained to a desk, and then he wouldn't be able to play the piano like he did as much as he did. Actually, Beethoven would be a better example.
So what you're saying is this is almost, even though we've heard of ADHD is more like a curse, what I'm hearing you say, it's actually more like a superpower if they harness their energy a certain way.
Okay, so yeah, exactly. The spin is, hey, your parents are doing good. It's rough out there, and your kids are something, and they're pains in the ass now, but they're going to be running the joint. They're going to
Yeah.
be the Steven Spielbergs, or they're going to be they're going to be making movies, or they're going to be doing a computer chip, or they're going to be doing something, and that's not even taking into account this whole other group of people that they call it spectrum disorder, which is the whole autism and Asperger's and that sort of thing, which is, again, we were talking behind before the taping, is there's an overlap, about a 30% overlap. So you can't just say ADHD or autism. Dr. Amin, who is one of the neuropsychiatrists famous for SPECT scans, he said when he started practice about 45 years ago, he had about 1 in 10,000 kids were autistic. And often that means nonverbal. And it's a whole different thing than hyper. And he said, and ADHD kids, hyper kids kind of were always throughout the population, always people who were kind of agitated and nervous and creative and all that kind of stuff. But these autism kids now are like 1 in 30. So there's also this phenomenon of waves of this kind of kid that are overwhelming the system. And if you say someone like an Elon Musk would be, I guess he's been talked about as on the spectrum, right? So that means not completely nonverbal, but a little odd, kind of difficult to deal with. And yet going to Mars, right? So those kind of people have a momentum in them. And we want to tell the parents, you've got this special kid, or maybe two. Sometimes they have two in the family. Like they got one that's autistic or one that's hyper. Talk about exhausting. Hey, you have a special kid, because in the regular system, their pathology is elaborated by extreme conversation and diagnostic code and everything else, and that demands a medicine. And the medicine normalizes their behavior or straitjackets them, for lack of a better term. They blunt their creativity, and they don't really have very good medicine for autism, by the way. They have pretty good ways to get people who are hyper to be focused. And that's one of the psychiatric drugs that have been lauded as the most successful in the last 100 years, is the amphetamine-based medicine for hyperactivity, especially in children. They say that's a real breakthrough of chemistry working against the system, against the symptoms. So chemistry works because the kid can sit there. But, you have to take the kid off of it for the summer or they'll stop growing, So every parent kind of doesn't like it. They don't want to do it, but they don't know what to do. So my kind of thing is, besides giving the parents some alternative diagnostic testing, we also say, and you, parent, are going to have to figure out that each of these kids has a different way of learning. So they don't all do well with the pen and paper. They might need to go and make a sculpture about it or something. Talk about South America and the economic system of South America for social studies. And instead of writing a paragraph on it, make a diorama out of clay or something like that. Because that's what I would have liked to have done in third grade. Is instead of writing something. So people tend to get marginalized into groups based on these genetic predilections. They call them, by the way, SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, which is basically a way of saying we can look at your genes and that one's knocked out and you're not going to be like the regular people. And what if you got more than one? You could have 10 of them. And then your life is pretty much over, unless you figured out that you can mitigate some of these biochemical circles with some very simple stuff like methylated B vitamins or methylated folic acid or zinc or B6. And a lot of this goes back to my earlier time in Seattle. I worked with the Seattle Schizophrenic Association, and we did orthomolecular medicine back in the day. And that was the idea of Pfeiffer and Hoffman with a lot of B3, niacin. Sounds pretty typical or boring now, but niacin's super important for all these biochemical pathways, zinc, and these cofactors that we think of as vitamins and things that we take, we don't know why, but you need iron and you need B6 and you need zinc and all these little micronutrients, or else this biochemical merry-go-round doesn't work. And then on top of that, if you've got a couple of clinkers in there genetically, these people accumulate debris. There's a thing called homocysteine, which is a cardiac risk marker that accumulates dramatically in these kids, and they could be dead 20 years earlier than their peers unless they figure out how to mitigate this. So if the parents are listening to this and they have a kid they suspect it being, on the spectrum or neurodivergent or ADHD or phobic or anxiety prone, chances are they have some of these genetic knockouts that accumulate in other parts of their body, not just socially being ostracized, but they can accumulate debris that makes them die earlier. And you can fix that. So that's the kind of thing they're not hearing. So the break.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that a lot of these people that do struggle with this, even if they get older and they don't get some type of help, that there a high suicide rate, or is there a lot of how does
Yeah,
that work?
both suicide, cancer, heart disease, all that stuff. And if someone said, "Hey, if you have an addiction, is your life expectancy going to be less?" The answer is probably. So a lot of these people, what we would think of as addiction being like a moral failure or something or weakness, this is them trying to get normal. They're not normal in their chemistry and they're trying to feel like everybody feels on a regular day. And if you can say, well, they're weak-willed, that's the driving force of most people's addiction is they just want to get back up to like normal. And even
When you
alcohol.
say addiction, are you talking about any type of addiction if these people struggle with ADHD?
Okay, so this gets exciting because if you can say, what if I could do a cheek swab? It wasn't even a blood test, and I could predict that this person's going to be prone to addiction, whether
Wow.
alcohol or methamphetamines or fentanyl or rage racing or something where it's a very dangerous behavior like base jumping, jumping off the mountain
Right.
and falling and doing things where you have to just stimulate your brain somehow. That is a short lifespan. And people think of that as like, well, just stop doing that. Don't be like that. Have moral valor or moral strength. But someone who doesn't feel the way we do can't help it. They need to try to get back to feeling okay. Sometimes substances will do that. So you can be
I hear you.
you could be an addict to gambling, right? And they always talk about gambling, being kind of an addiction, right? So gambling is something that they're waiting for that next hand to drop where they get a rush of dopamine. So the people who are low in dopamine do addictive behaviors to get that feeling. You can be a QVC shopping channel addict because there's a rush when you put the credit card down and you buy it. And by the time it comes to the door, you don't have any feeling about it. It's dead to you. The boxes just accumulate in the back because you don't even want to open them. It's the countdown, and they know that flashing light. The flashing light, and it's 5 seconds left, and that diamond ring or that pair of ceramic kittens or something like that, and they're getting some chemicals in their head, and that they figured that out. They don't know that's why they're doing it, but that's what they're doing. So all those addictive behavior, people say, just stop doing that. They're trying to be okay. So this is what's being able to be found by these genetic tests is like there's a predisposition for that, and you can mitigate that, and you can balance that out early so they don't get isolated and ostracized and labeled and shamed. And well, they're still going to be brilliant. They're still going to be interesting. They're still going to be creative. You're not going to stop somebody from being an artist, but you can stop them from killing themselves.
So you're hitting on something really interesting, and please, if I'm wrong, tell me because hey, I've been told a lot of that I'm wrong about my wife. Throw a little joke in there. Okay, but no pun intended. So what I hear you saying is that we have these addicted. There's these addictive personalities with ADHD. They have to be stimulated. I'm almost kind of seeing a trend. If we looked at, let's just look at the Seattle grunge era with Nirvana, the lead singer Kurt Cobain. He was
Mhm.
a young man. I know for a fact he had to have struggled with ADHD in some type of particular way, with the depression, with
Yeah.
having to get that next drug in him. Do you see where I'm going? I don't know. Am I hitting on?
Oh, that's exactly right. So I bet you anything he had 2 or 3 of these major genetic things, and you can pretty much count on if you have mental illness in the family, you've got these genes, and it doesn't mean you're
No
bad.
matter what, no matter what.
Yeah, that's what it is to be mentally ill, is that you can't cope with the regular program, and you may or may not have any medicine around, or any mitigating social structure like art therapy or something, and you may be making it worse by red dye, or you may be making it worse by pixie stick sugar, or you might be making it worse by doing meth or crystal meth or something and blowing your brains out with really strong chemistry. I just saw a thing about pink cocaine today. So
Wow.
they're putting pink cocaine in. Oh, it was a DEA diversion thing. I get these hits on my email from the DEA because I got DEA numbers. So they're like, "Oh, 5 different versions of pink cocaine were seized." And pink cocaine is not like cool because it's still got the bioflavonoids in it. No, it's got all these strange chemicals, including fentanyl in it, and
Wow.
weird kind of meth and this kind of thing. So it's whatever garbage they can put in the powder, and that's recreationally being passed around. So smoked or snorted or whatever. So that makes the brain traumatized and damaged, chemically damaged. But these kids are already that way to start with. Now, if they had exercise programs and pet therapy, and they were eating clean food and not dye and all the kinds of things that holistic granola type people think we should do, they're a lot more stable. And they're still probably the pain in the ass of the family. So I'm telling those parents, yeah, you did everything right. And you still have these days when you just want to give the kid away. So that's the part where we were coming in, instead of saying, oh, you just didn't try hard enough, or you just didn't get this right herb or something. It's more about, it's a handful. It's a big thing. And actually, thank you, because society needs artists and society needs creative, kooky people. And we don't realize that, but the ones that are the most interesting later in life are the ones that are weirdest earlier in life, and the ones that have the biggest struggle. So, by the time they're a conductor in the symphony or something, they've had a weird childhood usually. And hopefully they were loved and they had some nutrition and that kind of stuff. But now with the cell phones and the blue screens and TikTok and all the different hive-like behaviors with the kids, it goes so fast that the kids' minds are just scrambled. And one of the things you can do to mitigate, the parents who are listening can mitigate it, is limit screen time, blue screen time. And it's easy to say, hard to do. Every parent just gives the kid an iPad, says, just go away. Shut up. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a mom who has a severely attention deficit disorder, at the point where he has to be homeschooled and with her the whole time. We were talking about having like a camp, a ADHD camp, and God, what could go wrong there? But she's like, okay, great. Have the parents drop them off and then go to a spa day or something. And we're like, well, then don't you want to like go and do interactive stuff with the kids? No, I don't want to be around my kid. I want to go away. You take them. You know, that's
Wow.
the camp. I don't have any interest in spending any time trying to tell them how to put a puzzle together or whittle up a birdhouse or something. No, I want to get away from my kid. So there's a level of anger, shame, frustration, this and that has to be dealt with, because it's really common, and it doesn't have to be just, well, it's all across all the social economic levels, right? You can be richest family in town, poorest family in town, and you both have kids that you don't want to be around because they're just annoying, and they can do things that they can hurt themselves. They can be phobic. They can be, obsessive compulsive. These are all the spin-offs of these genetic knockouts. So find out what makes your kid tick if you have time, because usually parents are exhausted too, and that's why they rely on parents, teachers so much. But that's where I can come in and help with some sort of diagnostics. A lot of times the parents are not on the same page. Like,
Yeah.
one parent might be, let's do something holistic, and the other parent, like, let's get them a drug.
Yes.
That's science.
They never agree on normally.
Never agree, and it makes often blows up the family, and a lot of times there's divorces over the strain of having a child like this, particularly if they're nonverbal and really requiring attention. There's categories, by the way, of autism about how much care they need, because it starts with, like, they need, complete assistance. They're nonverbal and they're never going to ever be able to take care of themselves. Then there's the next level. They can't even feed themselves. They couldn't figure out how to find food if they were standing next to a refrigerator. They would
Right.
die. And then there's even more where they can't even walk. You know, it takes a village. It takes a team. It takes some supported medical personnel for each one of those people, sometimes more than one person. It takes that much. It's like, in a battle, you wound a guy and then two people have to carry him off the battlefield. So it takes a tremendous amount of the healthcare team to help this burgeoning wave of nonverbal people who are coming into the, past COVID now. But they're 6, 7, 8 years old, 10 years old now. And the ones that are in college, they're being snapped up by the Department of Defense and everything else because they're finding, oh, these are very useful people for coding and doing things where you can just put them in a box and they can do these incredible computer stuff all day long. And thank you, make cruise missiles or whatever they do. So I was down in San Diego for a long time, and I literally had a patient that was about as on the spectrum as you can get, barely verbal, but he had a very high security clearance, and he all day long just made circles and arrows and widgets and small computer code and stuff that would make cruise missiles or something that would blow up somebody. It was super high top secret, but couldn't talk to the guy. He's just like you always talk about engineers being kind of hard to talk to. This was advanced level of nonverbal person, but they could use his brain for that kind of stuff because they'll just sit for hours and do code. So they get snapped up. If they're genius types, there's industries that like that.
So what's interesting about what you just said, they get snapped up because people can see the gift right away.
Yeah,
They're focused. Now, the crazy thing is to them, it's not really a gift. It's just who they are.
right.
They become so natural, but there also is also that's a plus. But what's the downfall of
Well, again, we have to separate two piles. There's the neurodivergent people, of which there's a whole bunch of different. I was just reading off a minute ago. So you've heard of dyslexia, right? That's part of neurodivergent. You've heard of Tourette's. You can't stop swearing and weird things. ADHD, we talked about that, and then there's epilepsy, which is a strange, electrical discharge. But then there's also stuff that I mentioned to you that I might have had growing up. Calculia, which means a normal mind, a normal brain, functioning anatomy, but you can't do numbers. You just cannot make a number go together 2 plus 2. And so that kind of person might be marginalized and have to go into some sort of trade work or work with cattle or something like that doesn't require in any way writing two numbers together. And people are like that with dyslexia, where they just literally cannot read a word. It's completely upside down and backwards, and that limits who they are and what they can do and how they think about themselves. So they might be gifted in other ways. They might be beautiful musicians or whatever, but in our society, if there's some way that you stick out, then you kind of get isolated and terrorized and tortured and hurt. And that can cause, irreparable damage to your self-esteem, and you might even hurt yourself or hurt other people or become, sociopathic or whatever. And there's other versions of that and overlaps of that. People tend to do things like work in a job or work or be isolated or go out to Alaska and be a fur trapper or something where they don't have to talk to people. And we've already sort of allowed that to happen. That he's just weird, or he's an isolated person, or he's a gentleman bachelor farmer or something. There's pain associated with that. And I think that if you're a parent of that kind of person, you feel like you're not even connecting with your own kid. That's the kind of thing that I can help counseling that. I mean, there's a lot of people who are good at counseling, and a lot of the traditional pediatric psychiatrists and pediatric counselors are good at this kind of thing. So there's tremendous ways to reach out for the family and say, just get the burden off of me. But as far as taking an edge off some of these pathologies, that's what's exciting to me is you can help early, and they're still going to be different, right? So that's the difference. You can't make them not who they are. And you talked about them liking who they are. I know a medical doctor here. She said, "Oh yeah, my colleagues tell me I'm under medicated ADHD." And I say, and this doc says, "Yes, I am ADHD. As a matter of fact, I'm proud of it, and I hate taking that medicine because it won't let me be who I am. And I'm killing it. I have 3 businesses, and I'm rocking it. I'm running circles around all you guys. I like being like this." So some people master it. There's even autistic people who are doctors and do specialty type practices. There's definitely people who are autistic and mastering, the arts and letters and different things and science. And then there's people who are stuck in addiction because they found that something that they tasted or something they did made them feel better for a short time. And alcohol could kind of do this too. So say you're racked with anxiety or just bone crushing, not feeling okay, and you find alcohol. And alcohol for a little bit of time makes you feel not as racked with anxiety. It's going to be really hard for you not to sneak some alcohol because that makes you, for the only time in your day, feel normal. So that's an addiction because they can't stop and it starts affecting their relationships, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like that with a lot of things. And people, we had a seminar once, and a lady who was studying this sort of thing admitted that she became an exercise fanatic because that was a socially acceptable way for her to flood her brain with endorphins and get away from this crushing depression. And you mentioned Kurt Cobain; he was probably very depressed, and I don't know if he died of heroin or whatever, but a lot of times heroin is a choice for an
Right.
endorphin lack. You can have lack of endorphins, and that's what the opiates are all about. You can have lack of dopamines. That's what the speed type drugs are all about. So things that we find as a street drug are usually trying to fix our deficiency in our neurochemicals. And some people, oh, I wouldn't touch speed or I wouldn't touch heroin. But boy, for the people that are empty like that way, that's the first time they've ever felt normal. So it's very easy to judge people. Oh, just stop drinking, but that's the only time they feel okay, right? And it could have to do with GABA receptors, whatever. So psychiatry is not so much about testing. It's a division of medicine that doesn't really have medical testing. It just has observational diagnosis. And then there's medicine, but the medicine is based on studies that say that it changes these patterns of behavior. And so there's a whole new group of people who do sort of a holistic psychiatry, which involves all these different things, which, get people involved with their own care and changes their patterns of behavior and changes how they exercise and changes what they eat and changes, put them in the right job so that they're not set up to fail.
Would you say a lot of these people that are struggling with that have maybe some type of brain inflammation?
A lot of everybody has brain inflammation, so there's Alzheimer's, right? Alzheimer's disease and dementia and that kind of thing, which is if you don't die with cardiovascular disease, you start checking out later in your 70s and 80s with um, uh, neurological deterioration. And there's wet Alzheimer's, there's dry Alzheimer's, and a lot of this has to do with sugar. But inflammation, to your point, is something that gets us all. Inflammation of our nerves is a real bugaboo because it's real hard to reverse that and get nerves to come back. They used to say they couldn't, but now there's some
Right.
neat stuff that can, like cerebral lysin and different things. I think it's Dale Bredesen's work is pretty exciting about the end of Alzheimer's and the idea of soaking up some of these free radicals and getting rid of the toxic rancid seed oils and that kind of things, fish oils, balancing out the omega-6, omega-3, but getting the sugar levels down. So yeah, inflammation is bad. And take somebody with several knockout genes and then inflame them with a terrible diet and then put them in Iraq or something in Desert Storm and put them around the burning pits or something and get all sorts of petrochemicals. And then they're a mess, and they never get better. Multiple layers of toxicity, multiple poisons. You can be a farmer and get glyphosates on you and different chemical exposure. Welder. I had a little gal the other day. Her was married to a guy who was a pilot, and they had to live in the barracks right by the runway of these jet engines. And they would, dump the fuel, as they made the pass, and so they would get rained on with the jet fuel all the time. Which I could be wrong, but I think that's where she had this incredible exposure to lead because lead's often in high octane gas. So she's got ridiculous amounts of lead in her, and that doesn't come out. You don't sweat lead out. It doesn't come out because you run or something like that. You have to do chelation. You have to do EDTA. That's about the only thing that gets it. And every time we do it, she goes through detox and throwing up and whatever. So that is a perfectly reasonable person, but she's got a toxic exposure. And that person who had the neurological knockouts already, those are the kind of people that die. They can't handle that kind of exposure, right? So you can have a robust person that's exposed to a toxic load, and they don't have the ability. The average person can kind of get over it, but somebody who's got 2 or 3 or 4 of these things and they can't methylate, they can't detox, they don't do well. So this is besides having compassion for the families and what's going on with your kids and how you're going to how are you going to take care of them in the future? How are we going to make room for them? They're going to be our bosses someday. That's the theme of our talks. Besides that, it's like a whole bigger picture is the toxic environment we're living in. That gets very depressing very quickly. Oh, there's places where, you can't even have clean water, let alone jet fuel coming over your head or something like that. The water's poison. You got parasites in it. So kids are our future. And we happen to be in a fairly affluent society right now, but we can do things like give them supplements or give them macronutrition. And frankly, when parents are talking about taking their kid to a specialist, that's already a privilege, right? Because or even to have a parent, right? So two parents is better because at least you can tag team. One parent is good if the parent's competent, but a lot of times they're running around like crazy. And sometimes the kid doesn't have any parents. They're just, at the risk of whoever will take care of them. And so there's a tremendous need for the people who are in these service industries to take care of kids, and they don't have the time to figure out and genetically test them and see if they can change their diet, or if they could talk to the school and say, hey, my kid can't have any corn. They're wildly allergic to corn. They are suicidal and they have corn. So they can't be in the cafeteria here and have corn. And the institutionalized lunch lady is going to say, get at the back of the line. I don't care. I mean, I'm going to give you the corn muffin, and that's what's on the menu. So part of the thing is having the ability to talk to the school and see if your kid can be exempt from taking the school lunch, or you have to make special food for your kid, you know. And not everybody has time to do that, or has the ability to talk to the school lunch lady, or have an MD that'll write a letter to the school, and then it'll be codified so that kid does have a bona fide allergy or something. So it takes a team of doctors slash paraprofessionals, school officials who want to help, and that's what goes wrong if they cut the services and people are overloaded with the school burden of how many kids they have and cutting classes and that kind of stuff. So this is a problem. There's some neat things you can do to individually as a family member help your kid get better. And then as far as like helping the whole school system, I think we need to revisit how schools teach, because every kid has a different learning style. So that's another little,
I agree
we
with
could talk
you.
about that for hours, right?
Let's talk. Well, let's jump a little bit there. So you hit on something really huge is the way that these kids learn.
Right.
Very, very different. And I understand that to 1,000% because I remember I went to school. I went to Guam for 2 years, a country that I've never been to, which is a state, I know, but
Yeah,
it felt like
I've
I
been
was in a
to
third world country, no
I've been to
joke.
Guam.
Yeah, I was there for 2 years as a kid. My dad was military.
Okay.
And, after I came back 2 years, I came to the States, they put me in a special ed program because they just thought, Mark just he's just not getting it, not realizing that I was learning a different language and a different teaching system, right? So I'm in a school with, like I'm in a classroom with 10 people, think about it, there's 30 to 40 kids. And these kids, I'm not being mean. They were overly different where I was like, okay, I don't know why I'm in this classroom and I can have an intelligent conversation. Long story short, they put me into a psychologist saw me and he looked at my mother and he goes, you have a highly intelligent son and you can sue the school for what they've done to your son. I'm just letting you know. You didn't hear that from me. That's what he said. And because they made a mistake and they said that he learned differently. And
Yeah.
so you're taking me out of a class. So my point is that these kids learn differently. We've got your audio, we've got your visual, like you were saying, if somebody maybe used a clay formation or something for me to learn, then that's the way to learn. You don't put a kid into something. You have to make it right per kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an artist, but two-dimensional artist, but also I realize I'm very kinetic. Like if I go along a cyclone fence or a fence, I find myself like running my finger a lot along it. Like the kid that takes a stick and goes pop, 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 down,
Yeah. Okay. You're that one.
you get that. I'm that one. Or I go into a store, I have to don't touch that, I have to touch it. And that's how I get info.
Yes. Yes.
Some people they have to be at the front of the class and they have to hear every single thing that teacher said because they've realized that they can mimic it and give it back to them.
Yes.
Then they get an A plus. And some of the kids that they have to hear it a different way. If they go too fast, they lose it. Then they have to go back to square one, and then they're lost. And then they give up, and they're in the back.
Yeah.
They're causing trouble because they can't keep up, because they have to go brick by brick. They can't go forward. I was kind of that way too. I couldn't go forward if I had a question in my mind. Wait a minute. I had to raise my hand. Wait a minute. Does that mean that da 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 da?
Exactly.
Then they would go, stop asking questions because you're keeping the rest of the kids.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is I'm not saying this is a sign of it, but it's something I had to retrain myself. I had a habit of where I'd be using the restroom in a urinal, say somewhere, and there were squares. I would have to count the squares, and then I have to recount it just to make sure that I counted. I'm like, "Okay, this is getting out of hand." I had to
You know what
restructure my
that's
brain.
you know what that's called? That's stimming, self-stimulation. So what you're doing is you're making dopamine in your brain when you're doing that. Click, 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 click,
Wow.
click, 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 click. So that's called stimming. And so all these neurodivergent kids know what their particular stimming thing is. I used to work with an autistic man, autistic and epileptic man. He would take a phone book. By the way, front
Wow.
page, I don't know if
Right now.
you can see it. ADHD National Geographic Special Edition on the stands now. It says the science and what it tells us. It's all about this phenomenon. And they do talk about the stimulants as like, it's a God's gift to people who want to, be amazing. But
But it can also be a negative if you don't put that energy in the right spot. That's what you're basically saying right now is this could go into a negative area, and we
my
wanna
my
try to get it to a positive, correct?
my spin on this, like most journalism, it's written by 40, 30 somethings. Young people are journalistic, putting the copy together. And so most of these are kind of like pro ADHD kids who have taken Ritalin or Provigil or this kind of stuff, and now they're doing fine because they can focus on their research paper or something. So it's funny because I read this and it's not any of the stuff that I would do, but it is topical right now. It's really blowing up all over the world because there's so many kids like this, and now the kids are 20 and they're writing articles, right? So to get back to learning style, there's verbal, there's people opposite of you that need to be alone. They cannot process of other people. You're more of a social. You need to bounce off of other people, and you prefer to be around. You're a communicator. You ABC. You get things to go. You're an enzyme. You make things happen between
Know
other.
me already.
Yeah. And then there's people that they hear. Like I had a patient, get this, at 5 years old, she was international competition on a piano. They had her doing on a piano internationally at 5, right? And she hears symphonies in her head, right? And yet, at 5, she didn't have the maturity to be in a competition with other people or to be dragged around like that and no friends, right? And so it took the rest of her life to kind of get over that she was precocious is the word. Yeah, precocious. So I was talking to somebody who literally was like Mozart, that they heard whole symphonies. They could hear music in there. They could just write it down. It was already done. They could have a whole symphony in their head. They just keep writing, right? Automatic writing. And what's that person do? Well, she's a mom, and she's had all sorts of surgeries and she's had, bad things happen to her. And no one would know, hey, you were a famous rock star 5-year-old playing the grand piano because that didn't serve her much past the parents getting, accolades for how cool her kid was. But she couldn't stop it. It was just coming through. And those kind of people are very valuable to society. That's who brings in the operas. That's who brings in the Elon Musk SpaceX. That's who has these ideas. And we don't remember that they're half the time they're in the corner sucking their thumb and in the dark, rocking because they're so depressed. The mannequin, I always say that everyone wants the salesman when they're hitting their mark, but they don't want to be around the salesman when they're in a slump. So the manic depressive cycle, bipolar, right? Two poles up and down. No one wants to be around the bad pole, the depressed one. You can't go swinging like that without having the opposite. And people will just come along and take the fruits of an artistic bloom and then let you to your own device, the Van Gogh guy cutting his ear off. But boy, we sure sell those paintings for hundreds of millions of dollars now. And he was just miserably depressed most of the time. Probably was this genetic markers, guys. So if you have take home message, by the way, if you have family mental illness, you have depression in the family, not just a little blue, but just crushing clinical depression and not responsive, by the way, to SSRIs, not responsive to Paxil, Prozac, Zoloft, crushing depression. If you have that, you've got these genetic SNPs and you can check and go, yep, there they are. And you can help that with non-drugs. And if you have addictive behavior like alcoholism, yep, you probably have these genetic SNPs. And if you've got autism, yep, you probably have these SNPs. And if you've got ADHD and they go, we can't keep this guy in the chair. He will not stay still. Doesn't matter if we give him the favorite food, he will not. He just bothers everybody.
But the only way to keep that person in the chair is if they're doing something that stimulates them, that
Right,
keeps them in the chair.
right, right. Like counting those little tiles that you would do. You could do that. But if it's like, okay, now it's time for you to not be in the bathroom, Mark. You have to go back and sit in a chair and listen to someone wow, 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 and not go and talk to 3 other kids and get like a little group going, a little team of a little army man or something, just listen to somebody in the front that you can't even understand, you're gonna be the kid that's antsy and squirrely and wants to
Yeah.
go to the bathroom again.
And you can't pay attention.
And
That's
you
what they
wanna
would
go to the
say.
bathroom and just stim and watch those tiles again. And they all find a way to do that. I was started to say the autistic guy would take a phone book and just flip the pages. I started doing with this one. He'd just flip the pages, and he would do that for he'd do that for 12 hours if you'd let him. Or water falling out of a faucet, and they're getting a stimulation by doing that. And the lady that started doing to finish the thought, was doing a conference, and she was an autistic person who got her doctorate, but she said she would always tap the inside of her teeth with her tongue. No one would see her do it. She knew that no one would see her do that, but she had to do that
Ah,
constantly, right? And people get little ticks, they fiddle with their hair, whatever they do, they fiddle with it to a point where it makes their hair go away. They drill a hole in their hair, so it's just a bald spot, right? So the
yeah.
obsessive compulsive stuff. So, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Everybody kind of knows these people are kind of phobically weird, phobic about bugs, whatever. And that's a glitch, and you can make that way better. So there's a tremendous amount of pain and suffering that are in not just kids, but kids turn into adults, and they're still weird, and they're still suffering, and they're still not getting the medicine they need. And the medicines that are available that are drug medicines don't fix them really. They kind of just put a band-aid on it. It doesn't make them healthy. It might make them more socially acceptable.
So,
Better.
what would you say are if you were to okay, so what would you say are 3 things that are maybe simple or that somebody can do that will
Exercise.
help them out? Number
Exercise.
1, exercise.
That's absolutely free, cheap, good for everything, and, no one's gonna you're not gonna get arrested. So, you can be a complete weirdo freak, 100-mile a day type ultra marathoner and stim yourself by doing that dopamine and endorphin release, and people give you medals, right? That's easy, and every kid deserves and another thing is sleep. This is free, and every kid who's not yet 27, their brain's still developing, and they need about 10 hours of sleep. That's not happening. So the big thing a parent could do is unplug the phone, unplug the screen, unplug the computer, and make them go to bed. And that's hard. That's really hard because the parents stay up, but they need sleep, 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 sleep. So exercise, sleep. I want to say diet, but that's a whole can of worms. The cleaner, the shop on the outside of the grocery store. On the inside is all the processed food. On the outside is like the dairy and the meat and the vegetables on both sides of the store. So Whole Foods are expensive. That's the problem. Poor people have to eat crap because it's cheaper, and they have food deserts where you can't get anything good. But to the extent that you can, keep them away from the sugar, keep them away from the dye, keep them away from the Doritos and the stuff that have chemically induced mania. And if you have the wherewithal, get these tests. And when you find out it's a yes, then you have the option of supplementing with fairly simple cofactors and stuff that makes a huge difference. So if you're at the point where you want diagnosis, I would say, and I have case histories and stuff on our presentation, but it takes a village. So the blood test for certain food allergies is huge. It's about 30% of the pathology goes off the top if you can avoid commonly eaten foods that person has made an allergy to. So it's not an immediate hypersensitivity, it's a delayed. So you can eat corn today and then 3 days later you have a migraine, or 3 days later you're having a temper tantrum, or 3 days later you have bloody stool, or 3 days later you have eczema. So all these things are delayed and you wouldn't know it associated with the food that they really love, the pizza or the gluten or whatever. So if you have the ability of the paraprofessional, the people that can help you do that, food allergy testing really cuts out a lot of pathology. This genetic testing and then mitigating it with these methylated products, that's a huge thing. And then at home, sleep, limiting the blue screen, limiting the amount of stimulation with texting and all this kind of high activity that's 5G and everything that's high frequency, getting around rhythms and things like the soil and touching the earth, animal therapy. Pets are really important. I know it's a hassle to have pets, but some of these people, that's how they stim. Like you were looking at the tiles, but if they're petting a dog, it's the same thing, right? And that's
It is.
socially acceptable. So you can have, if you're staring at the wall, they're going to think you're weird. But if you're petting the dog for an hour, no one is going to care, right? Same thing. You're creating some dopamine and calming chemicals and stuff. So food's important, sleep's important, exercise is important. Art is super important, and that's getting cut out of the school systems. However, you can allow kids to express themselves, like got back that mud, the mud diorama of the South American ecosystem or whatever. Figure out what your kids want to do and get them into some sort of finger painting or watercolor or throwing clay or making clay or whatever. And that takes money, it takes time, it takes extracurricular activity, but these enrichment opportunities dissipate a lot of the pathology, emotional pathology and physical pathologies. For kids to nutritionally get better, there's ways for kids to mechanically get better with physical exercise. There's ways for kids to get socially better by doing things with their family or having peers around. This COVID screwed everybody up because they isolated kids, and now we're finding how terrible that was. So, there's some very simple things, and you can get even more complicated the more you start asking for help, and that's where I kind of get the call. So I would get the call after they've seen a counselor, after they've seen the neuropsychologist, or after they've seen they've already put them on the Adderall or the different types of medicines for their diagnosis, and they don't feel good about it. They want a plan B. So um, in general, there's more people than you think that are like this. They are often the ones that contribute greatly to society at a great expense to themselves and their suffering. And my overarching passion is to acknowledge that there's a lot of suffering in these family units that are not being shared because
They're being misunderstood.
misunderstood. They don't talk to the other people across the street that also have a kid like that. Everyone's ashamed. And so the more, like, again, this is on the front page of the National Geographic in the supermarkets. It's a big enough deal that they have a special edition glossy thing about how to deal with it, know
Wow.
when to get a diagnosis, understand ADHD at every age. In other words, it's not just for kids anymore. You can be an adult with hyperactive disorder. Strategies for living well with ADHD. And they all talk about exercise. They all talk about, bonding with other things like animals or even they allow you to get into your weird computer nerd thing, gaming or something like that. They allow people to stim. They're saying that's okay if you don't just do it all day long, right? So I would like people to do more natural stuff, more water stuff, more swimming, or, teach your kids to swim, that kind of stuff. Be around animals, do things with the dirt, garden, good old fashioned granola stuff that we thought was going to happen with everybody in the 70s. Earth Day, we thought everybody was going to have a garden. What happened? The more you can interact with other people, the more you can have cross generational stuff, have young kids be with old people, have old people be with young kids. That keeps everybody fresh. Again, where's the grandparents? Where's the it's hard now with kids to actually have a relationship with someone that's not your own kid. That's the I guess what I'm saying is it used to be you could, tell a kid to knock it off if it wasn't your kid, but now you have to be careful because the kid will go and say that you looked at him weird or something. So
I think we also got to go back. Maybe I don't know if you agree with this, but the stem, the nucleus of the family has been broken down, and so it's gotten a lot. I don't know the exact years. You'll know it better than me, but I think that excuse me, in the 50s when mothers were staying home,
yeah,
and now we have the nucleus of the family being broken up. We've got two different sides of families, but nobody really thinks about how does it affect the kids? What type of damage does that also do? And not only that, but even if the families are together, they're not together. You could be together in the same room, but not together. And that's happening today. A lot more social media, the phone, the tablets, everything. And people don't even eat dinner together anymore.
right. So yeah, that's a cultural phenomenon that is hitting heavily on our kids, and the kids look to the adults to give them some structure and order. And the parents and adults are hanging on by their toenails too, and they're on the phone, and so the kid looks up, and then they get on their phone, and
Right.
they're talking to their friend, and then the parents yell at them to get off the
Monkey see, monkey do.
yeah, so I feel sorry for all the grown-up kids that are also not getting their needs met because it's a rough, society, kind of global society we're living in now, and it's hard not to get spun round and round and faster. So the compassionate conversation of anybody that's bringing a, town hall community group together is, "Hey, let's all just take a breath and tell each other that we're doing okay," because individually, we're doing 110%, and we need to sort of release the feeling that we're doing it alone.
I
And
love it.
it's not like saying, "Hey, you gave your kid Ritalin, that you're the worst parent." God bless the pediatric neurologist. God bless the first line defender teachers who are putting that kid out and going, "Hey, that kid has got to be out of here because he's making trouble for the rest of them." And God bless the people that are at the aides, and everyone's trying. So
Mm,
in my world, I wish they all could go and be in Waldorf school and run around with, pink silk crowns and have an organic garden. But not everybody can afford that. Some systems have to do a lot of kids and move them through. Still, they can honor the qualities that are childlike and not just crush them with a certain type of AI generated performance test. Saw some congressional report where somebody was saying that the studies are in the kids that have been learning with the laptops, the Chromebooks or whatever.
right.
Each kid has a Chromebook. They are studying certain sort of situational paragraphs for the test that they kind of get a whole snapshot in one bite of what that means. Not individually. What you think that means is different because you're a poet, and what you think it means is you're a farmer. Read this paragraph and have a creative moment with it. No, there's a concept of that paragraph that you need to remember so that you can answer the question. So the way the AI is teaching the kids in their Chromebooks in real time now is different than they would learn organically in a different setting. So it is showing up now that the educational system is not working, is I guess what I'm saying. And it specifically doesn't work for certain types of learning styles.
We live in some interesting times. Before we end this, I would like to talk a little bit about the word, neurodivergent. This isn't something that's been around for what, 30, 40 years. What is that, around 2000? When did this
Yeah,
ever?
it's kind of a politically correct word, and it's a way for people to not label like my kid's a troublemaker. Once you start giving somebody a protected class, it kind of goes with being woke or being politically correct or whatever. But neurodivergent is a way to explain a population that may have something better than just aberrant behavior. So it's putting the brakes on a big category of things. Like again, there's diagnostics related groups. There's ICD-10 codes for all these different neurodivergent subcategories. But the word neurodivergent by itself allows that there's a whole population of people, and it's not like they all got something wrong. There's going to be people that are not like us. And then we start looking around going, well, you're not like me either. Or I was that way too. Or here's my story. If
Right.
I had to touch all the tiles or I had to run the stick along the fence. And pretty soon everyone's got a story about how they were neurodivergent. And pretty soon you realize, oh, everybody,
Lot.
everyone's neurodivergent. You know, there's nobody that's normal. That's what's kind of the best possible thing that can come out of it. No one's normal. They're just at various levels of competency in figuring out the system. And depending on how they're wired, they may be incapable of working with this system. There's some people who are accelerated because they're good at, making black and white decisions. They can, hit the button faster than the other person or something, and they get promoted, but they might not be able to listen to a song and remember it, or they may not be able to pet a dog without it biting them or something. It takes all these different kinds of people to make society, and we're learning from everybody. So that neurodivergent term is a forgiving polyglot word that's not necessarily medical. It's sort of sociologically available to us, and it's appropriate to say that word now. So if you're talking to a group of people, you use the word neurodivergent, and then people go, "Oh, okay, he's cool. He's not going to make fun of my kid." It's
Well, the numbers are big. I
spectrum.
mean, the funny part is a lot of people have ADHD or a slight form of it, but people don't really talk about the people that know how to actually cope with it. There's some people that have become friends with it. I look at it like it's another. It feels, I think, to other people that it feels like it's something. It's another person.
Well, people like that doctor, she said that's my superpower. Creative people who don't kill themselves end up being very, very amazing
Successful.
people, very successful. They got all these hobbies and they're all sailing on a boat and they're skinning beavers or whatever they're doing. They're doing everything, and people go, "Wow, that person's amazing." But they had to fly their own flag and tow their own boat or whatever the analogy is. They beat to their own drum, and it takes courage and moral character to not listen to other people. When they say, "Don't do that. What are you doing out there in the rain, dancing in the rain? Get in here, you crazy person. What are you doing? You don't even have your shoes on. Get out. What are you doing?" And people who understand that they're unique and they celebrate that, it takes its toll, but they also are very interesting people at the end.
It's very interesting, and you can correct me on this one. I'm not sure, but the person that I kept thinking of when you were talking was Robin Williams,
Right.
genius,
Perfect.
and he
Yeah.
made everybody laugh, and
Yep.
he
Yep.
was the most funniest guy in the world. I mean, someone to do Miss Doubtfire. Let me tell you something. That's something I would have done because I know myself. I would do anything to be with my children, and but we didn't realize that he was very sad, and he would always try to make people laugh when they were sad, and then he didn't make it.
Yeah, and cocaine, right? Cocaine. So he ended up with Lewy bodies, which is sort of a dementia thing, and I think he was terrified of losing more faculties. But he definitely did do cocaine, right? And cocaine is a stimulant, and it's for those people that don't have enough dopamine. So he's an ADHD kid, ADHD comic, ADHD adult, brilliant.
Throw some cocaine on that,
Little bit, yeah, little cocaine because that's what helped him feel like he could fill in the gap,
and
right?
he was quick, think on his feet. It was just,
Sure.
it was amazing.
Well, yeah, brilliant,
Wow.
and
So
burns out quick. So that's we remember the artists for their peak. We don't remember what they were like when they were, black depression and couldn't get out of the bed for weeks and, suicidal and all that kind of stuff. No one wants to talk about that.
wow. Dr. Drew, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, you got to know that we're going to be doing a series on this. There's a lot to talk on the subject. We've been doing this for a little over in an hour. There's not enough information to get out there in just enough time. So we're going to be cutting a series. You'll be seeing this live. A lot of people and the viewers are going to be seeing this going live in all the social media platforms, including Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And what I want to tell you is there's a lot of families that are struggling with this and they're keeping silent. I mean, this is on the front cover of the National Geographic right now. I'm actually going to go buy my copy after I get done playing pickleball. But everyone out there,
You had
you
to
know,
bring up pickleball.
I had to bring up pickleball, so that's my ADHD right there. So, thank you so much, Dr. Drew Collins. You can find him at proactivechoice.com, proactivechoice. Again, this is ADHD, neurodivergent, and spectrum disorders, and your kid's future. And that's what this is about. It's about your kid's future. Do you care enough about them? Of course you do, or else you wouldn't be listening to this. Listen, sometimes it just takes one person that can help you. Call up Dr. Drew Collins. The number's on the screen. That's basically what I have to say for today. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Drew. If you'd like to say something before we head out, what would that be to these parents out there that are struggling before we head out?
They're rock stars. If you have a kid that's hard to handle, just know that they're going to be very interesting adults and the world needs them. So you're doing a good job.
Thank you so much for what you do and for your passion for wanting to help people have a better life. I look forward to our next one. God bless you.
God bless you. Bye bye.